Good evening, one and all present here. Welcome to Xavier Center of Historical Research, Porvorim, Goa. For today's evening history are Goa'S Inquisition, Facts, Fiction, Factoids, presented by the author of this book, Mr. Machado. We are privileged to have Mr. Machado amidst us to present his book, which invites us to witness information before us on the topic of Goa'S Inquisition. I also welcome Dr. Fernandes, Academician, researcher and writer, and a Seminarian of the Archdiocese of Goa and Daman, who will be the moderator of today's history hour. I would like to inform all of you present here that this history hour is video and audio recorded for the archival purposes of Xchr and for usage on social media channel of Xchr. Without further ado, I would like to call upon the director of Xchr, Father Anthony da Silva, to welcome the gathering and introduce the speaker and moderator. I call upon Father Anthony.
Good evening once again to all of you, and very welcome to Xchr. We are very pleased that you responded so generously to our invitation and have come here this evening in order to enlighten ourselves, in order to get into a dialogue, but not necessarily to create controversy. That we would like to say right from the outset. We are quite aware that this topic is controversial. We are quite aware that this topic may lend itself to differences of opinion, and we have no problem with that. This is a research center and we do a lot of scholarly exchanges. So right from the outset, we would like to lay down this very clearly. A brief word of welcome to our two, one is the speaker and the other is the moderator. The speaker, as you see, Machado, is a person who is well known in circles of history, but also in other issues of culture, language, etc. He is an engineer by profession, but he is published also in these areas of the social sciences. So we are very happy, Alan, that you have agreed to come and spend some time with us. He's not new to Xchr, and I think he's not new to many of you in the audience. And if there are any more details to be mentioned, I leave it to Jason. I say a brief word about Jason, the moderator. Jason too is not new to Xchr. He has been here before. He has worked here in our library. He has lectured here on occasions. And so we are very happy to welcome him back. He's now come back with a doctorate that he did abroad, and he's got a PhD now, and he works, I think, in Lisbon University Institute, and therefore has wide experiences as an anthropologist, but also in other fields. As we know very well, today all research is done in a cross-disciplinary manner. And so anthropologists also talk to other social scientists and interact with them. So history is not very far away from anthropology, and so there is a lot of interaction. Besides, Jason also has a degree in law, which is very rare for us in the social sciences to have a colleague in law. And so that makes his discussions also very exciting and very interesting, because his perspectives are different from those of us trained essentially in the social science, in the social sciences. Having said that, I just would like to get the ball rolling, and so I just want to tell you that in the beginning, the speaker will present to us the content of his book, which he has published recently and he will talk about. And then Dr. Jason Fernandes will moderate the session so that it remains fluid and it remains fluent and we don't get stuck on any one issue, because that is not the purpose of this evening. However, if you have further questions that need discussion and so on at greater depth, you can approach either of them, but particularly the speaker of the evening, because he has published the book on the Goa'S Inquisition. So having said having made these few remarks, I hand over now to Jason Keith Fernandes. You can take over and eventually invite the speaker. Thank you very much.
So good evening. I won't stay between you and the speaker very long. I just want to lay a few ground rules before we begin. There will be a Q&A, a question and answer session after the presentation. So if we could all hold our questions until then. I mean, this is the norm in most of the lectures here. So we'll just follow that norm. Two, right from the very outset, I'd like you to bear in mind that tonight we're not here to establish the truth. The truth is not going to be established tonight. We are here only to listen to the considered and scholarly opinion of Mr. Prabhu, and subsequent to which we will have questions to clarify any doubts we have. So without further ado, I give you Mr. Machado Prabhu.
Friends, I have not come here to defend the Inquisition or to condemn it. See, that is not my purpose. I have come to tell you about certain things that I have learned about the Inquisition from a study of over a few years on a lot of primary sources. This particular research that we have done has given me quite a different opinion of the Inquisition that I had, Goa'S Inquisition that I had before taking on this work. Primarily this opinion and this thing that we had of the Inquisition before that was largely from Anglo-centric sources and created what has been termed as the Black Legend. This was primarily done by Anglo-centric writers based in Dutch and English writers, and this creation of this Black Legend occurred during a period, and this is important, you see, because all this time that these creations are taking place is a time of conflict, as you see as we go along. It occurred at a time when Spain had occupied the Low Countries, which ultimately came to form Holland and Belgium, parts of Belgium. The Dutch had started a war of resistance, and the English joined them. This was at the time of Philip II of Spain and Elizabeth I in England. This military offensive, which, as you may have heard about the Armada, Philip sending an Armada to Spain, occurred at a time also when there was a lot of conflict between Catholicism and Protestant rights. It was the time of the Reformation. So this military conflict spilled over into a big propaganda war, which Anglo-centric writers took forward. Now the Inquisition, and this was primarily directed at the Spanish Inquisition, did not respond because it kept its documents, everything very secret. So, from a lot of secondary sources, this Black Legend was created from a lot of secondary sources. Now the same narrative reached India around 1800, the first decade of the 19th century, and it was brought primarily by one Protestant English Reverend, Claudius Buchanan, who came here just at the time when Wellesley, the Duke of Mornington, was expanding British territories in a big aggressive way all across India. Tipu had just been defeated and the Marathas were going to be next, and it was a time when Napoleon also had reached Egypt, or rather he had already been defeated from Egypt, but it was around that time. And so what happened was, Wellesley took this opportunity of occupying Goa at that time. Now when he occupied Goa, Reverend Buchanan also came here. Now Buchanan had a different motive.
His motive was to promote Christianity, the Protestant variant of Christianity in India, which he thought was ripe for a sort of evangelization. And he took this offensive against the primary Christian rival they had. That was the Portuguese in Goa. And he writes in a very way, like, when the fires in Goa were lately lit. And this was more than 40-50 years after the last out of the powers, public out of the powers held here. So there was a lot of rhetoric in the process. This similar narrative continued at a time when Indians, primarily Goans, were fighting for independence. And these Goans were Goans, not Christians, not non-Christians, not anything else, but Goans. And this was the time when Priolkar's book came out. That was in 1961. Now, Priolkar has done a very good job, honest job, but there are certain deficiencies which I'll point out. He was aware of primary sources that were there because he quotes from Adler's book, a lot of primary sources, and he knew that this documentation was available in Lisbon, in the Biblioteca Nacional, and as well as in the Torre de Tomb. But his book, about a third of it is confined to the narratives of, just a reproduction of narratives by Daman and Buchanan, which is again selective because Buchanan wrote a lot of other things about the Jagannath Yatra and other things which were in a very derogatory tone, but he never quotes that. He also devotes quite a bit of time to space to try to show the authenticity of Daman's narrative, which of course it was, and all those about 10 or 12 pages of it, which could have been dismissed in a single page if I had written it, because Daman's name is mentioned in the 1774 inventory, which was compiled in Goa. His name is clearly written. So there's no point, you don't need anything more than just saying the name is there in the inventory created by the Inquisitors. We don't need to go and prove all these sort of things. So when he writes something, let me read this out, but when Priolkar writes, the story of the Inquisition is a dismal record of callousness and cruelty, tyranny and injustice, espionage and blackmail, avarice and corruption, repression of thought and culture, and promotion of obscurantism. It's good rhetoric. And it came at a time when there was an attempt to link the actions of the Portuguese government to the black legend of the Inquisition. But much of it is, I think if he had read some of the primary sources and based his book on that, he may have had a different opinion. I don't know, but I would have loved to have discussed with him on this. But he was not the only one with this narrative. There were a lot of Christian Goans, and one of them was the foremost freedom fighter that you have here, that is Tristão Bragança Cunha. Cunha was such a fighter for Goa's freedom that he was taken to Lisbon and put in prison there. I think the other gentleman was Gaitonde was also there, and some others like that. So they were in the same boat, they were fighting for this. That's why I said it is a time of conflict that you select a target and attack that target. And that in this case, because in the Anglo-centric, this one, it was not only Spain but also Catholicism, the attack took place. Buchanan, it came to Protestantism and English dominance. Here you are fighting for your own freedom. Goans are fighting for it. And in these sort of situations, you can go into rhetoric and other things. But then you come down to what is really history based on what evidence is available. You need to go to primary evidence for a lot of things, not depend on secondary sources. Secondary sources are fine in certain things, but primary sources are the main thing by which you sort of sit, analyze, or compare, and it takes a long time to do this. So what are these primary sources we are talking about? See, still closer? Yeah, sorry. But if you miss something, you can always beg, borrow, or buy a book, or you can have a look look at the note that has been put up, I think now it's quite clear. The note that we put up, and I am happy if anybody wants to contact me, I am happy to guide you to any source that you want to research or see for yourself. So these primary sources. Now, the one with the maximum amount of documentation is the Acordo Torre de Dom in Lisbon. This is the National Archive. You find an enormous amount of primary sources available on the Inquisition files, which Lisbon, Coimbra, Evora, and the Goa'S Inquisition. You are free to access this. This is freely available on the net. You can download it sitting comfortably in your own room, in your own house. The type of information you get here is the documentation that took place, the guidelines that were given. There is a lot of, there are about 100 auto-da-fe lists. That means the persons who were judged, who are abjured, who are punished in the public auto-da-fe as well as the private auto-da-fe. Then there is an inventory. When the first Inquisition was first closed, that was in 1774, an inventory was made of all the documents available with the Inquisition place. These documents were kept in a very secretive location. There was one room called the Secreto. This was in the Botlanger, the Sabayo Palace, or the place where the Inquisition operated from. I will come to that in a little later, the Botlanger, because it's quite interesting to know these things here. It has disappeared now from, the building is no more there. So it was kept securely locked, and there were 3 keys, only 3 keys. One each with the 2 inquisitors, and the third one was with the promoter. Now the promoter is the prosecuting lawyer, if you want to call it. Totally in this Botlanger, there would have been less than 100 employees. The Inquisition never had more than that many. I think it was maybe closer to about 50, 60. That list I have given in the book. You can access it. You can also access it from the Torre de Dom. Primarily, there were different officials over there, headed by the first Inquisitor. Now, the second place you get 2 very valuable documents is in the Biblioteca Nacional de Portugal in Lisbon. One is called the Reportorio. That was compiled by one of the inquisitors, Figueira. He compiled it in 1623, in which there are about 3,444 names. And this again gives a list of all those who were prosecuted by the Inquisition up to that time. This document, you can't download it as such because it has been digitized. But what you can do if you're interested in getting these names, and you may find some interesting names because there are quite a few from Aldona, which is my ancestral place, which is very interesting because some of the same names appear in Kankar's Torre de Aldona, the Tombo de Aldona. And one of them is, the first name is Lorenzo Ferrao, who was the first man from, I'll come to that a little later. But this list of these names have been compiled and put into an Excel document which is available in the repository of Sao Paulo University in Brazil. And this is accessible, it is open to all, it is accessible to you. So if you're interested, download the document, have a look and see these things. The same library also has another book compiled by a gentleman called Antonio Moriara around 1860 or so, 1880, something like that, the exact name, time I've got. And this gives a number of auto-da-fe lists. He handwritten notes. Some of them you will find in the Torre de Dom, but some you don't find them there. Obviously, when he wrote these documents were available. Where are they now? I don't know, some of them. Maybe they'll be discovered and maybe more will be discovered. So we'll have more information in future when some other person can take it up and write these things again. So there are a lot of information. Then when this Inquisition was finally permanently closed, that was in 1812, the Secreto was closed, and there was one of the promoters was asked to compile, which, because they were huge files, a lot of case files and other things, what was important, and the rest, I'm not sure what happened, but they have disappeared. Maybe they were burned, we don't know. About 2,000 documents were sent to Rio de Janeiro, and these are available again online. Anybody wants to access them can do so. I've given the websites in my book, and I'm happy to tell anybody what they are if they ask me directly. So you can get about 2,000 documents there, which gives you some interesting things. So going through all these primary sources, plus there is a lot of information and a lot of new scholarly studies done by young Portuguese and Brazilian scholars, plus a few Indians as well who are doing these things, and others as well. There's an Italian gentleman called Marcocci, and this gives very interesting insights in different aspects of the Inquisition. Now let's come down to what I've learned, you see, and if you'll excuse me if I refer to these notes. I'm getting a little old, so I can't remember everything. Now, the first thing that hits you straight in your face is the Inquisition was reported to the Portuguese king. It got its legitimacy from the Pope, but it reported to the king. It was an instrument of the king. It was an instrument that was used, the premier institution that was used to promote a policy of trying to integrate the vast diverse populations that were there in the Portuguese overseas, I wouldn't call it empire or anything, because it was just some outposts as such spread all over the world, right from Macau to Brazil, Africa, Goa as well. And Goa was made the headquarters for this investigation. The aim was to impose a kind of social disciplining and act as a health code for Christians. Now the Inquisition never was meant primarily for Christians. It was not meant for non-Christians unless they came in the way of the Inquisition, or they were seen as trying to divert Christians away from what was considered the religion of the state at the time. Now, Francis Xavier, there's a lot of said about him being a primary agent of the Inquisition. He was a Spaniard. The Inquisition was a Portuguese institution, the one in Goa'S Inquisition. A Spaniard did not have anything to say in the policy. He was sent to India by the king to spearhead some of the evangelization, and he didn't stay very long in Goa. He went on from Goa to the east coast, and then from there to Malacca and beyond, and he died in this thing. Now, the only sort of reference I find, because I've read the letters of Francis Xavier and other things, the only reference that I find is a letter that he wrote from Moluccas. Moluccas is in modern day Indonesia, in 1546, in which he suggested to the king that he send the Inquisition to the east, that is to Asia, because there were a lot of Jewish and Muslim influences that were affecting Christians here. He never mentions Hindus. The term Hindu was not invented at that time. The term for these people are Gentios, that means Gentiles or worshippers of idols. So that was all he said. So now you see, if you look at the first 40 years, and this is very clearly given in Figueroa's report, the statistics are very clear. The Inquisition's first effort was directed almost entirely towards in suppressing of the Novos Christos. Who are these Christos Novos? They were converts of Jewish and Muslim converts. Muslim converts were called Moriscos, and they were the descendants of these converts, and these conversions had taken place in Portugal. In Portugal, yes, they were forced into it or expelled. And a lot of them took freedom and came down to Cochin and Goa. If you look at the statistics of the first 40 years, that was, I told you, about 3,440 names or such. About 27 of this number, I've calculated these, were prosecuted for what was called Kalpas de Mauro, that is Islamism. Islamism, you see, right from Europe to, from the Ottoman Empire right down to Gujarat and everywhere else. It was heavily dominated by Muslim and Islamic rulers. So a lot of people coming on the way, they have been shipwrecked or converted to Islam. Then they came down to Goa, so we have got some supplied armaments, some went over and helped these things. So these are all related to Kalpas de Mauro. So 27% is the highest number were prosecuted for this. Judaism, 18%. So these are the highest numbers that were prosecuted. Okay? What is known as gentilidad, that means for crimes related to the Gentile religions, like worshipping in temples, for Christians, mind you, if Christians went and did these things, or they wore pagan different clothes, or violated some of the social norms that were created, then that came under something called gentilidad, and those statistics increase only from the 1600s onwards. Now again you see one coincidence here. Why? Why not before? Why not? Okay. So the main thing would be that during this time, it coincides with the Dutch fleet arriving of Goa. And this created a lot of social, political unrest among the king and Portuguese, and they wanted to secure their hold over the local populations. So that is one of the explanations. There were others as well. Now, when you come to the Woodlander, this building was located just next to the Say Cathedral. It was former Adil Shah's palace, and then it was taken over by the Inquisitors. And they built a prison at the back and the administrative building in the front. And in this administrative building, the offices of the different buildings of the administrators were on the first floor, where the Inquisitors as well left. But very, very surprisingly, I don't know how many of you would be really taken back with this, the ground floor apartments, there were 8 big rooms. There is a 1779 plan which says very clearly these rooms were rented out to gentios always. So right within this great prison, what we think of and get scared of, there were shops there, and one of the shops was a butcher shop. This document is very clearly there in Rio de Janeiro archives, and the Inquisitors got instruction from Lisbon to have the shop shifted, as it was not proper to have it in that building. So you find that all the elite sort of cooperated with the Inquisition, and it was not related to religion as such, though in different forms. For converts, of course, there was no turning back. Once you are a Christian, you have to remain a Christian. So the Inquisition acted as a sort of health code for them, which sort of said, okay, don't deviate from this path. Now, in the provisional councils, which were there, provincial councils that were held in the 16th century, one of the directives was given that new converts should be treated with mildness. Whatever that term may mean, I'm not questioning that, but the term is used. And you can see that in the actions of this thing, because they were given up to some 10 to 20 years by which they could not be prosecuted for going into gentilidad. they were also, for the first two offences, they received mild sentences, and it's only at the third time that they were prosecuted heavily for repetition. So, you can consider that is the facts. You can take it in whichever way you want to look at. Now, I'll just give you two instances. Now, again, another thing is about 1.5% of all the number that were prosecuted were priests for various things. You know, like for heresy, wrong doctrine, some of them for sodomy, some of them for sort of Inquisition as well. So, you know, the Inquisition tried to keep discipline within its system. You may ask what were the numbers that were prosecuted. Now the inventory gives a figure of about 16,800 or so. I have sat down and counted all the numbers that are there in the inventory, and my figure comes to around that figure, which coincides with what Antonio Baião had written in his famous book in Portugal, in Coimbra University. Then I compared this with the Auto de Fades. So when I compare these and put these together, the number increases. So my figure comes just short of 19,000, but again, some of the lists are missing. So when you put some averages and other things and make some statistical kind of comparison, I think there would have been about 23,000 people who were over 250 years. And out of these, about 177 names I've got who were executed, burned physically. And some of them were also burned in effigy, or the bones were burned, those were dead or were absent. Now, I'll just give you two examples, which sort of justice and mercy, that is the motto of the Goa Inquisition. Now, when you look at justice, there was a priest called João da Costa, who was a serial sodomite, and he was denounced. The trial lasted for about 9 months. And then the papers were sent to Lisbon after he confessed, and from Lisbon came the directive, carry out the sentence, and he was executed. One paper says on Mandovi Gate, which is in Old Goa. Which this one. The other is of an Ethiopian slave called Xavier. Now, you know what slaves were? They were not treated as persons, they were treated as commodities. They were given only one name, Gabriel, no second name. Just to call, like a dog you call. That was a slave's position in Goa, not only in Goa, all over the world in that time. Now this Gabriel was a Falasha Jew from Ethiopia who was captured as a slave by Arabs and sold to Arabs, and one of them brought him over to Ahmednagar, which is neighboring Chau in there. Now Gabriel converted to Islam, and then from there he escaped and came to Portuguese Chau. There he converted to Christianity. Then again he escaped to Ahmednagar. Then for some reason he came back. And in the process, he had committed a number of offences as per the laws of the Inquisition. That he had gone over to Islam and then come back, he was a renegade and all that thing. He confessed. Now, as per the procedure laid down, he should have been executed. But the inquisitors, and after all, he was a slave. What does it matter? Nobody is going to ask for you. He doesn't have any family here, nothing. But the inquisitors sent his case, asked the two interpreters, is this man in his right mind? Does he understand what he is doing? Then they gave their opinion. Then the case was still not satisfied, was sent to Lisbon for an opinion. And then he was sent to the galleys as a punishment till the case verdict came back. But we know that this happened in 1595, but we know that 2 years later there is some documentation saying that the sentence had not been carried out. We don't know much beyond, but somewhere we may find some documentation. So this is what is interesting. We have to revise our situation and come up with fresh opinions and change opinions if the evidence shows that. I don't know how much time I've got. 5 minutes. Okay, 5 minutes. Let me see what I can put in. Now the Inquisition was not the only court here. There were 3 different courts. It was one of 3 courts. One was the civil court, the Relation. Then you had the ecclesiastical court, which dealt with church matters. Then you had the Inquisition Code. The Inquisition Code dealt with only certain matters like heresy, bigamy, sodomy, because sodomy was considered a violation of the natural law, that is God's law. So it was considered treason. So they were treated quite harshly. False testimony, and these sort of things. Gentile Dada, of course, most of them related to these sort of things, going to the carrying out sacrifices at temples or in the house, keeping idols in the house and that sort of thing. And the punishments for these vary. A lot of them considered what was called spiritual penances. Those who were new were given instruction in the monasteries or in certain things. And they were, the main, this one was public humiliation. You wore a costume of infamy. In certain cases you wore a karocha, like a dunce cap, which went like this. Then you wore a long jacket over your, this one, which is San Benito, if you were to be not condemned, or if you were condemned, you wore the Samara, which had flames and other things. And then if you should have been condemned, but you were not for that particular occasion, you had what is called the Samara Fogo Revolto. That means the flames pointed downwards, which meant you're spared this time, but you do it next time you're out. It was a suspended sentence in a way. Bardes and Aldona, they reveal a very interesting case of the Inquisition. Aldona contributes about 1%. That is my ancestral place. I think I'm running out of time, so if people are interested, this document is already posted online. You are welcome to have a look at it, or you can further information in the book. So I'll just conclude with one more thing. My ancestors left Aldona, I think it is around 1700, and we settled down near Mangalore. And my quest was to find out if I could find any names there. I could not. So they were not prosecuted, none of them were this one. So with this, I will just conclude this and leave it to Jason to take it further. I'll be happy to answer any questions but again, these questions I will confine only to what I know, and to these topics I will not be taken into anything of other things. Okay, thank you.
This is all right, yes. Then take it. Right. So before we begin, I just want to compliment Mr. Machado Prabhu, because he's a very brave man. He's a brave man not only because he has agreed to publicly come and speak about a topic that's really controversial, and to speak to a hall this which is full of people, but he's a brave man also because he's gone through the details, counted numbers and names. This is an act of bravery. This is an act of heroic virtue almost, because not too many of us actually go to the details, count things individually. So for this, I really compliment you. This kind of work deserves a medal actually. What became obvious to me in the course of this presentation is that the devil is in the detail. So much of the information that we have about the Inquisition relies on very broad brushstrokes, and here you have a man who's actually given you as much detail as he can in the limited space of time that he was given. For more detail, I would urge you to do as suggested. Read his book, follow the sources, and read them if you have the linguistic capacity. But also to interpret the document, you also need a certain training. So that also doesn't come easy. Finally, there are also, as he's pointed out, lots of work that has been done by other scholars. The work on the Goa Inquisition is actually not as sparse or scarce as many of us would believe. There's a lot of work out there. Unfortunately, because it's Brazilian and Portuguese, Italian scholars, the work tends to be in Italian or in Portuguese. And in Goa, we've lost the linguistic capacity to read stuff in Portuguese. But there is material here. I should also point out that there was an interesting series of interviews with scholars who have done work conducted by Dale Lewis Menezes of the Archdiocese Collective, which is also freely available online. So I'd encourage you to go and listen to those interviews as well. Rather than go through the issues that I noted down, I'll just go to the house rules. So first, let's bear in mind that the moderator's voice is final. The moderator is acting here as a representative of the hosts of this private property, right? So let's bear that in mind. When I as moderator request you to stop, please stop. Yeah. What we will be doing is I will take questions in groups of 3. When you articulate your question, you first indicate your name. If you have some kind of institutional affiliation, you do that as well. Collect 3 and then we pose it to the speaker. These need to be clarifications and not speeches. If it is a speech, I'm going to ask you to please stop. Yeah, and you will respect my request. Like I said before, we're not here to establish the truth, merely to clarify our questions about the position raised here today. Right, so let's take the first set of 3 questions. So first 3 questions. Your name, 1, hold on, 1, do I see 2, number 2, anyone else? Right at the back, that gentleman there, okay? Is there a mic going around? There is. So this gentleman here.
I'm Bijol, no institutional affiliation. I would like to know, one case, since you have gone through a number of reports in Portugal, in Lisbon, I would like to know the infamous case of Garcia de Horta. Now, Garcia de Horta, actually, he was a Christian noble, and his sister was burned at stake in Goa because of some confessions made, and it appears that because of her confession, Garcia de Horta was already dead. But his body was exhumed and again consigned to flame and in effigy. Now, I got this information from a number of sources. Now, and Octavio Paz, the famous Mexican author, once said, these confessions were so brutal that normally the people will confess anything he wanted to confess, and they will imagine what their tormentors want to know, and they will confess. And it seems that his sister had confessed that Garcia de Horta also used to practice some rituals which are typical of Jews.
Thank you for your question. You're right that Katrina was burned, but I would suggest that if you're interested in it, a whole process file, a trial case is available in the Torre de Tom archives, and then you can decide for yourself whether it was brutal or non-brutal or whatever. I would not trust a Mexican author to know what is happening here, because that is the historical process. You can judge for yourself. And the second thing in this judgment, please go back, no WhatsApp, no nothing today, no this one, go back to a time 300-400 years back and try to imagine that time and then understand the process of what's going on. Okay? Yes, Garcia was a famous this one, and if you want to, I've given a little bit in my book about it, not a lot. But if you're interested, you can read that, and there are further references where you can take this forward.
I'd also like to add to this point, on the case of Garcia de Horta, or his sister's Katrina de Horta's case, the entire judicial process actually has been transcribed, and there are 2 Portuguese scholars, women, who have worked on it. and yes, Miguel Lorenzo. Miguel Lorenzo also has worked on it. But these two women have been interviewed by again Dale Lewis Menezes. Once again, it's available on YouTube. So I encourage you to go and get the more information on this there. And also they would have written some papers, so that's also available. And I want to pick up also on the point of Octavio Paz. Now, I'm not familiar whether Octavio Paz was in fact anti-clerical, but like our friend, what's his name? Krishna Braganza Cunha. These are anti-clericals. These are men very often, and this is very fashionable, Republicans who were anti-clericals. The history of Mexico, for example, especially in the early 20th century, is a history of violent anti-clericalism, just as is the history of Portugal in the early 20th century. I mean, even the 19th century, ever since the constitutional monarchy, you have these waves of anti-clericalism. So, once again, I want to go back to what you said about sources. When we go to sources, go to the primary source, rather than relying on Octavio Paz, on Braganza Cunha, or when we look at these people, we also do a research on these people and their agenda, their political location. This is what a good historian would do. So I will stop there because I don't want to take the limelight away from the speaker. The second was Mr. Barve. Is that correct? Is that you?
Srikanth Barve, individual. This is regarding classic governor in 1567 instructed to make it inventory of all villages regarding demolished temple and their property. Was it due to Inquisition?
The Inquisition never, as far as I know, never gave an order for demolition of temples.
No, I'm not asking demolition of temples.
It's one second, sorry.
Demolition of temples was held in 1541 and 1543 in this body. Thereafter, after 1560, okay, in inventory of demolished temple. This is not regarding demolition. This is inventory of demolished temple and its properties, which was ordered by governor. So, ordered by governor in 1567 as per the Puratam, that book published by archives. Was it due to Inquisition?
As I told you, as far as I am aware, the Inquisition never gave an order for demolition of temple. And most of these temples fell into disuse, a lot of them fell into disuse after people converted, and then they had to have a different source of expressing their religious fervor. So churches came up. But it's a very complex question and it cannot be answered in half a minute. So, and I would suggest that we have a different forum for this discussion, open forum, on evidence-based. They are both plus and minus, this way and that way. And we should be open about this. What has happened has happened. Okay? If you're interested in knowing something about temple demolition, there is an American scholar, I forget his name just now, but his articles, 2 articles came out on the reasons for temple demolitions, and these were not against religious things, there were no political powers against each political power. You know, there were a lot of, for instance, the Chalukya temples were demolished by the Cholas and other things like that. So it's a very complex issue which cannot be discussed in some small thing like this, and we are not such great scholars. It requires a lot more study before we comment. So I'm not going to comment further on that. Thank you.
You know, sometime, I think early on in my academic life, I learned this one lesson, is that the true scholar is not afraid of saying, I don't know, right? So you know certain things and you speak about it, and those you don't know, you just say, I don't know. I'm not a scholar on this early modern history, but I have done some work on the Comunidad history, and it seems to me that this kind of thing is really the desire of the state to figure out what land is temple, what land is not, or former temple, and what can be taxed. It's a question, it seems to me the issue is one of taxation rather than of cultic practice. Yeah, thank you. There was a hand that was raised at the back over there. Was it Father Jason Pinto? Yes, so Father Jason Pinto.
Yeah, Father Jason Pinto, Salesian of Don Bosco, Ireland. Yes, the Goan Inquisition lasted for 250 years. I have read your book on this one, and also Slaves of Sultan. And what struck me in both these books were what comment you make. You make a claim that the social elites always supported the colonial power. And it is true also with the case of the Goan Inquisition. I wanted to elaborate on this. What do you mean by the social elites? Who are they? The institution of the Knights, you mentioned it in your book. You also mentioned just now about the Mercado di Gentile, the big rooms which were there. Could you elaborate on them and say how the social elites actually supported the colonial power, specifically the Goan Inquisition?
I've got a chapter on that in the book which gives more details. I had some statistics somewhere here, but I can't seem to... here. Now, the number of persons investigated compiled from the 1774 inventory, which is under this thing. I don't have the percentage here, but the highest percentage came from this category. Now, when I use the term socially underprivileged, because I don't know what is the correct term to use, but these people who come in this category, the people who are defined as Kunubis or Sudros, the Portuguese, the Inquisition used the term Sudro for the male and Sudra for the female. Then there will be laborers, like slipper makers, carpenters, butchers, barbers, all these are clubbed together. Now the greatest number of these that were prosecuted are not from Goa, please. They are from the province of the north, and that occurs from the 1700 to 1745, or a little before 1745, say 1740 or 1738, I think, because 1739 the province fell. And there you find that the highest number come from there. And if they have any complaint today, it's those people who must complain most. When you see that I made a comparison based on, again, that is subject to revision by better scholars with no further detail to go into it as this is there. But I have compiled, apart from this, about 8,000 and odd names, 8,000 and odd names from all the autokephalics. I have put down what has been given as per their names, the places where they came from, their professions, their relatives, their offences. Note, I use the word offence and not crime, as the Inquisition would have said, because today we would dispute some of them as being crimes. Then punishments, all these have been recorded. Now this, apart from this, the repertoire, as I said, gives about 3,000 odd names. So we have got about 11,000 odd names and details of persons, which constitutes about 50% of the total number that I have estimated. Now, these names will be available to anybody who is interested at some, I hope, in the near future. And I will give details to whoever wants to have a look at this. It will be freely available and downloadable, and probably this will come out at the University of Sao Paulo. It is in work in progress.
Right, so we have time for 3 more. Are there any more, Mr. Sardesai, the gentleman over there in the here, and is there one more and one gentleman here? Microphone, please. So let's No, no, let's take that gentleman there since he's closer to the mic, then we'll come to you, but we'll take you first.
Hello sir, my name is Noronha and I'm assistant professor in Bombay College. More important, I'm a PhD student. So I'm currently working on execution of Jews. Was it due to religious purpose or more of economic purpose? And I've gone through, actually I'm novice in the research, like just 6 months. So I've got some secondary evidence where I've seen that Jews were persecuted or under Inquisition because of economic reasons, to share the spoil of the wealth which they would acquire after the Inquisition. Many evidence are there, but right now I don't want to give a speech of how many I found. But sir, can you put some light on primary sources based on that? Would be really helpful for me.
Okay. Now, one of the real objectives of why the Inquisition was sent here was to contain the influence of the Novus Christian on trade. Okay. Judaism also threatened, and there was a lot of hysteria in Portugal against Jews. And this Historia, for that you got to read authors like Saravaya, and some of these names are listed in the bibliography of my book, and these books are available, you can download them freely as well. So you can get more authentic information there than what I can provide. But one of the primary reasons was, apart from the religious aspect, the economic control that this entire Novus Christian and Judaism and Jews had right from Macau through the Indian Ocean, through Istanbul, Damascus, into Amsterdam. They controlled the gem trade, they controlled the cloth trade, they controlled a lot of trade. And this was one of the reasons why the offensive was taken against them. And the moment that in the first 40 years, they were practically wiped out. Many of them fled and went to Macau and other places where they got this thing. So it was primarily, I would say, it was both economic as well as religious aspects. And incidentally, the first case against the Jews of the Novus Christians happened before the first inquisitors reached Goa. 10 Jews from Cochin and 10, not Jews, Novus Christos from Cochin and 10 from Goa were shipped all the way to Lisbon after the trials here for a further trial there, and then they were subjected to an auto de fe. What is interesting in that is only one person, an elderly lady, a widow, was burned. The rest were gradually released, and these documents are available in the Rio de Janeiro archives. Okay? And they were released. So what does that tell you? You are taken out of an environment where you control economic activity to a separate place, and then you are released. You can make your own interpretation. But what I would tell you also is that some of these prominent ones, like Jacques de Oliveira, he went to Istanbul, where he was welcomed. In fact, the Sultan there said, what idiots are these kings of Spain and Portugal? They're sending the best people and I'm benefiting from them. They're benefiting my economy. They're artisans, they're traders, they build armaments industries, they've got cloth shops. So, I think it was both.
Mr. Sabdasai over here, right in the front. And I'm sorry, I said we take you first, but I'd forgotten.
No, I think the gentleman requires me to stand because what you have written, sir, is really very, very good reference for our. My two questions, very short questions. They are basically for my tangible information only. After the auto fe, the punishments were carried out somewhere along the river Mandovi and then to another place called Campo de Santo Lazaro. But in old Goa right now, there are two pillars which we call as the pilaries, the new and the old pilary. Is there any mention of anything related to Inquisition of these pillars? First question. And the second question is, we talk of Palas de Sabayo, where the Inquisition court was held and the shops were asked to vacate. But presently when we see, in front of St. Cajetan Church, they have put up, ASI has put up a plate which says Gateway of the Palace of Adil Shah, which I am a little confused. So my only question is that. Thank you.
Look, I'll clear your confusion. Now, the first thing is, these punishments were not carried out on the day of the Auto de Fa, because the Auto de Fa, please understand very clearly, it was not a day of punishment. It was a day primarily of celebration for the inquisitors, in the sense that they would take abjurations from a number of people for various reasons. Some may wanted to escape all this. So they took it as a case that we have brought back these people who have left the church. The punishments were not, and the inquisitors did not carry out any punishment. They were handed over to secular authority for corporeal punishments and to religious authorities for spiritual instruction and penances and days of isolation and other things. So that process took some days after the Auto de Fa. The only place where these executions took place, many of these documents, the documents don't particularly mention any place, but it is from other sources that you get. One is the Campo São Lázaro. Now the Campo São Lázaro was located on a large ground next to the hospital of São Lázaro, which is a hospital for lepers. On the old maps you can find it next to a large lake, and I would think that is Karamboli Lake, because that's the only lake that is there today. And to approach that road is you pass St. Paul's, only the facade is left, and then somewhere just beyond that. I don't think that thing exists. There is a cross? Oh, fantastic. I would like to ask you about the location. The second place is also where executions were taking place was at the Mandovi gate. There is a gate which I just discovered 2 days before, at least on this thing. So it is just on the road that leads out from the road leading down the Sei Cathedral towards the Usuain ferry. There's a Mandovi gate. So they were led there, and close to that is this ground. So I would assume that Mandovi Gate is mentioned in the case of Father Constantino, who was executed in 1738 for heresy, and but that is not mentioned in the Inquisition documents. That is mentioned in article written by someone else. That article also is freely downloadable. Regarding those pillars, those pillories, now they were used for whipping, nothing more than that. Okay, they have been misnamed if you look at Google file, you will find some other names. But those were pillories which are used for whipping. And whipping was quite a common, I think it's called a surki or something like that in Portuguese. Yeah. And that was a common punishment, and it was meant to humiliate as well as to publicly humiliate as well as to inflict some punishment. So a person was tied like this, and then your back was exposed, and then you got some whips. Some whipping was done on the public streets, but they were whipping posts, nothing more than that. And they were not unique to Goa. Recently in Deccan Herald, recently means a few months back, they showed 2 posts like this in Vijayanagara Empire. Identical posts, pillories in Vijayanagara Empire. So they were used there as well. And they were common things. Whipping, in my school days I got from the principal. Now today if you get something, the teacher will be hauled up in high court and everywhere else. So times have changed. Okay? I hope I've answered. Thank you.
The palace.
Now the Adil Shah Palace. Now you see the Sapayo Palace is different from the Adil Shah Gate, which is there today, was part of the complex of the Palacio de Fortaleza. That was where the Viceroy was staying. And you see the Viceroy's arch over there was part of that palace. I've got some, the palace is no more there, but I've got some sketches, if you like, if you try to Google Herita, Caldera, El Carita. You won't find that there. There is a website called HPIP. Right? Sid Mandarita is there. I can give you this one. So you can see that. In fact, I don't have it here, but it's there in there. So I've got a photograph or rather a print of that. So it was part of that palace, and that palace was the viceroy. He moved there. There was Mascarenhas. He was an old man, likely in his 70s. He could not climb the stairs of the Sabayo Palace. So he moved to this place in 1555, and then it was gradually expanded. Okay?
Also, once again, with this regard to scholastic portfolio, there's also work done by Joaquim Santos. He's published a number of papers precisely on this question. Sid Mendirata has addressed the question of how this what we currently know as the gateway to the palace is actually something manufactured in the early 20th century. See, the early 20th century is a wonderful time for invention. Right? Everyone was inventing stuff. From the British to persons in the subcontinent. But I digress. The third question.
My name is Prabhu. You refer to one letter written by St. Francis to Rome. In February 1542, he writes one letter to Rome where he says, I spoke Castilian and these people spoke Mulbari. I trampled upon their idols, I spat upon their idols, I destroyed their temples in Malabar. This is the direct letter written by him to Rome. Thank you.
I think so. That seems to be more of a statement than a question. So thank you very much for your intervention. Any other questions? One, two, anyone else? Number three? No, they should give. And we're also running out of time. So I'll just take these last two and then we'll call it a night.
It's a general question.
Your name first.
My name is Daulat Hawaldar. In the modern times, when we are looking back at the history of Inquisition, I am not on the evidence of the facts, but do you collectively feel guilty about what has happened?
Why should I?
No, we, including me. The society, we feel guilty about the humanity. That human beings can be so cruel.
Are you done?
Yes.
The next question from Matthew. I don't think this is it's a fairly philosophical, interesting question, but fairly philosophical, and perhaps unfair to put it directly only to Mr. Machado. So we will leave it at that for now, and we will take Matthew Almeida.
Yeah, good. I was about to ask, introduce my question with the same note, are we guilty? And before I could come to know about the Inquisition, I did a small research on that, nothing big. I had a very big, a very different idea, and I used to always feel guilty as a Catholic because the Inquisition was something which the Catholics are guilty of. But when I got to know about it, maybe a year of this thing, it was a different idea as Mr. Machado has expressed. Now my question to you, sir, is this. I realize there is one thing in that the administration of the church in the 16th century and onwards was under two institutions, the Patrovada and the Propaganda Fide. How does this, play a role in the implementation of the Inquisition? And the next question that I have is, why is it that there are no records written by Indians themselves or Indian rulers and so on and so forth? We are relying solely on the evidences written by travelers from elsewhere.
Regarding this propaganda fide and the Patrovada Real, the propaganda fide is a different organization from the this one. But the only thing I can tell you is that the Inquisition was used to counter the influence of the propaganda fide, which was dominated by Capuchin friars, French friars, operating from Surat, and one of the cases related to Father Ephraim. That is given in my book quite clearly, and it was purely a way to counter rival organizations, so which could not be countered by the Portuguese authorities directly. So they used the Inquisition to use heresy laws to do that. So if you read his trial, which is there, and his case file is quite in the auto de file, you get this quite clearly. There is a Frenchman called Amis, a scholar who has written quite well on this, so you can see there. Regarding why Indian sources you don't get much about the Inquisition, probably didn't worry them at that time. I don't know. I cannot answer that because I have not studied it. As I say, I admit my limitations there. Okay?
Yeah, so I unfortunately be running out of time. If you had raised, I'm sorry, I can't take any more questions. We've run out of time now. You should have been much quicker on the draw when I was asking for hands. I want to thank all of you for your time here. You know, but before that, one quick word. You know, in the Divine Liturgy in the office, there is one of the antiphons which says, "Our God comes openly now; He keeps silent no longer." Something to that effect. And for a long time, I've been thinking we are living in a very wonderful time because we're able to talk openly about the Inquisition. Open the cupboard, look inside, and realize that if we put in a candle, there is less to be afraid of than there is if we kept it shut. So we really need to thank scholars like Mr. Machado Prabhu for the hard work he has done. And not just the hard work he has done, the willingness to come and meet with people, answer their questions. This is an act of huge generosity. So for this, I think he deserves a round of applause. And I should also ask you to applaud yourselves because you have been a wonderful audience. So thank you very much.
On behalf of Xchr, I would like to thank Mr. Alan Machado for his in-depth and valuable knowledge on Goa''s Inquisition, and especially for debunking our naive approach of the topic. Thank you. I hope that this interactive talk may help us to further study on it, helping us to understand more on Goa''s Inquisition. So thank you, Mr. Alan Machado. Please give me a round of applause. I would like to thank Dr. Fernandes. You have smoothly moderated the history hour. Thank you for your timely interventions, your insights. Thank you very much, Dr. Jason. Give a round of applause. I would like to thank the Xchr team, Just Scholastics, who have made this event possible and a successful one. And lastly, I would like to thank each one of you present here for making it for this history hour, for your active listening and your interactions and questions in this history hour. I hope to see you once again for many more history hours and programs at Xchr. Just a small announcement. The book sale on Alan Machado's Goa''s Inquisition, Facts-Fiction-Factoids is being on sale at a discount.